Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Irwin, and I'm VP of Communications at Spins. First, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Second, I wanted to apologize for the last-minute link switch. Due to a last-minute surge in registrations, we needed to upgrade to a larger Zoom room, so we apologize for the inconvenience. Our country is experiencing some big changes over the last 4 weeks as a result of COVID-19, and we're seeing consumer buying patterns shift rapidly. Today, Katie Paul from KeHE and Catherine Peters from Spins are going to review the phases of customer purchasing over the last 4 weeks with a focus on natural and wellness products. With that, I'll pass it off to Catherine. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for being here. And again, as Mike said, we apologize for the last minute switch. So let's quickly jump into our agenda for this 30-minute window. We're going to take some time reviewing shifts in consumer buying patterns, as there have definitely been some shifts, as we all know, particularly digging into then emerging consumer behaviors, what's changing week to week and as we go through this and what's for the future. What are some brand strategies for growth? I think that is a particular area many of you will want to focus on. And then certainly as a quick wrap up and what's next. So with that, I will turn it over to Katie.
Thanks, Catherine, and hello, everyone. I hope all of you are staying safe and healthy during this uncertain time. I know that there's so much confusion going on out there in the marketplace, but thank you to all of our frontline employees, whether it be our suppliers and retailers and broker partners, as well as anyone that's joining internally from Spins and KeHE. So I want to take us through some shifts in consumer buying patterns, specifically what's been going on in the last 4 weeks. But before I do that, it's safe to say that today's world as we know it is transforming and continues to transform daily. We don't know what the new normal is going to look like, and everyone keeps kind of talking about the new normal. And we're not saying that we're experts on what that is going to look like, but what we do know is it will look differently than it did 8 weeks ago, and it will look differently than it even did yesterday, for that matter. The virus is definitely impacting our country and heavily impacting metropolitan areas in New York, Illinois, Michigan, New Jersey. However, there are early signs emerging that the flattening of the curve is working in New York and perhaps elsewhere, so we are staying positive on what the future could hold. How have these changes really transformed shopping behavior? The short answer is drastically, but the longer answer is buying patterns really have shifted throughout the weeks of this pandemic, and 3 distinct phases have emerged through these weeks. We're likely still in kind of the beginning phases of overall impact on not only buying behaviors, but the economy as a whole. But let me touch on these 3 key phases that we're mentioning. Phase 1 is really your proactive stock up. This is when consumers started to hear more and more about the virus coming into the US and started thinking about their wellness and their self-care proactively. So this is the period where we saw vitamins and supplements, herbs, homeopathic products, as well as digestive enzymes start to spike during that period. So those are weeks ending, end of February through kind of the beginning of March. Phase 2, which really took place kind of that 3rd and 4th week of March, is where we saw the massive stock ups. So these are categories like frozen or general merch with toilet paper and paper towels and cleaning supplies, as well as this is when we started to see some spikes in alcohol. Phase 3, so phase 3 is really, it's quarantine. It's, we're all either on lockdown or stay at home, we're working from home. And this is when we started to develop some new habits. And this is when we started seeing those staple products do really well. So, or spike, I should say. Soup, pasta, baking mixes, and ingredient type products. Sneak peek under the hood for the week ending April 12th. Trends are kind of flattening out. So we saw a 4% drop from prior week, but we're still at about 125 index to January's baseline. It's hard to believe that that would have been Easter week, and it's going to be really difficult in the future to assess how the holiday impacted the week versus the virus. But more to come on that. So what does this mean for the natural products industry? Well, really more consumers are purchasing natural products in general. The intent of why they're purchasing, it's slightly unknown, but some can kind of speculate that when consumers couldn't find their staple conventional product due to out of stocks on shelf, they were forced to purchase some sort of alternative brand, and many of those alternate brands were natural product brands. So that could help us define the 15 million additional buyers that you see here of natural products in the week ending 3/15. That was kind of during that first week of the massive stock up phase. In addition to that, consumers had more trips and were purchasing more per person. And my initial question was, why would there be more trips during that week? But really, this is the week where there were still a lot of unknowns. How much should I buy? How long is it lasting? How big of an impact will this have longer term for me and my home and my family? So consumers were unsure and likely had to make additional trips and potentially trips to multiple retailers. And then with that, natural products brought in more than half the incremental penetration dollars across all products, including conventional brands. And most of the increase across all products came from that increased buying rate that you see there on the right-hand side. So that's trips and then dollars per person. So that was during that peak stock-up week. So where are consumers shopping? Buyers of all product types, including the conventional brands that I mentioned, behave similarly, although natural product buyers move to the internet at a higher and quicker pace than your conventional brand buyers. And then more specialized outlets tended to have a much lower increase rate and then started to slightly decline, likely due to consumers minimizing the number of stops, which then leads to larger one-stop shops. Those seem to be winning in popularity. You see things like Club, but Club also had big declines from week to week. So from week ending 3/15 to week ending 3/22. I did read another study that actually mentioned Club experienced higher visit share on the weekdays versus the weekends, unlike mass merch, which was fairly steady throughout each day. So that could also impact the week-to-week. But real behavior will definitely be interesting in the future. So natural products were still driving growth during that peak stock up week. And what you see here is the dollar sales growth. And it's overall product growth in both the natural and multi-outlet channels, so MULO. And what you see here is grocery, although it's contributing the most dollar growth because it's the largest segment within there. You'll also see that things like frozen and supplements and gen merch on the right are really what people are pantry loading. And then the natural buyer increases are kind of reflecting that same thing. So if you look at how many people are buying more natural frozen products, 64%, in comparison to the conventional rate, that's about 20%. General merchandise, natural products, 55% more buyers, whereas looking at the conventional is much lower there. So it's just interesting to see how the stock up is shifting more towards the natural products. Again, whether that be because consumers were forced to buy alternative products, or whether that be because consumers are shifting their behaviors for the long run. And we'll touch more on that in a little bit. I'm going to turn it over to Catherine for emerging consumer behaviors.
Thanks. So we're going to quickly look at a few behaviors that we've seen emerging over these last few weeks and thinking a bit about how they might look in the future. Again, not knowing exactly what the future will hold, some considerations. We're going to hit 4 key areas, one being overall natural wellness growth, or actually I really should say it's more that Katie just hit it, which is that we certainly have seen through these stock ups that consumers are still very much demanding natural and wellness. And many predictions are, and I believe we would all probably agree, that the consumers are generally likely to continue moving further towards healthy products as we go forward. Also, we'll cover areas of looking at self-care, as we expect that to continue, habit changing, and particularly in the shorter run, how consumers have been reinvesting some of their time while staying at home, and finally looking at habits that might be good for the world around me. So here first, seeking supplement. probably not a surprise. Many of us likely have these in our households now, if not already before. We have definitely seen herbals, homeopathy, and overall vitamins and supplements have a tremendous increase versus normal rates. The particular darlings of this time in stock up have been products with elderberry and vitamin C, whether that's the ester C version or not ester C, which relates to digestibility, and certainly very high buyer counts versus prior year at the same time. While elderberry already had some pretty high rates, you can see they were nearly 4 times during the stock up phase, as they were in January. And then vitamin C had even a more dramatic lift during this window. So consumers are definitely seeking immunity as these new novel viruses, really our body is the first line of defense. Similarly, next slide, moving on into beyond supplements is food as medicine. This is while we saw continued strong growth through the stock up period, we very much anticipate continued long-term growth in products that support the idea of food as medicine. You can see several areas here, across things like yogurt with probiotics or some of the fermented products have continued to perform well. So counter to thinking that everyone was only grabbing milk and eggs, which they were, by the way, at a very high rate, they were still purchasing products that further build immunity beyond, supplement types of products. And again, we would anticipate this to be a trend that will continue well past, this early pandemic phase. So moving on, let's look a little at that second section I mentioned of habit changing and reinvestment of time. So certainly while many are supporting local restaurants where they can and getting takeout orders, the new world of cooking multiple meals and snacking at home has grown very quickly and more than anyone would have ever anticipated just a few short weeks ago. And as Katie mentioned again, what we saw particularly in some of the buying patterns in these early stock up weeks were that customers were flocking towards longer life products from grocery and frozen departments, particularly, and more so than refrigerated or maybe fresh produce, et cetera. We have seen some of that rebound, in some of these most recent weeks of April 5th and April 12th with some return to buying habits. For example, the refrigerated plant-based milks were indexing higher in the stock up, but now, shelf-stable plant-based milks were peaking higher during the stock up, whereas it's back to refrigerated, leading those trends last couple weeks. So while in many cases there are new habits, related to cooking, I think that the adjustment within those habits is what will be interesting to see as we go forward. The couple of trends we've been particularly noticing are that there's definitely this bifurcation between convenient everyday meals and then ingredient event cooking. With just the sheer number of meals being eaten every day in households, not everything can be an event. So as we see these last couple of weeks post stock up, we're seeing that trend of both continuing to index high, things that are quick meals as well as ingredients for that deeper load. And certainly still pantries are seeming to be refilled, at least with some products. Some of the ones most popular in the last couple of weeks continue to be vegetable soup, pastas, et cetera. And so it'll be interesting to watch how many of these habits stick, once sort of at least the work life returns to normal. As they say, I don't think full life will return to normal for a long time. Similarly, on the next slide, frozen trends have been similar. Shelf-stable fruits and vegetables, while they outpaced frozen fruits and vegetables, frozen still outpaced produce and fresh, as I mentioned. One thing in particular I want to note is that we are seeing a continued interest and expect it to be a long-term trend of very nutrient-dense, searching for foods that are nutrient-dense. So I thought it was really interesting to see just how strong, for example, edamame popped. I think that's a great example of that type of product. And certainly in my household, my kids have been snacking on it more than I would have expected. So some interesting trends when you peek beneath a little bit to look at nutrient dense and the continued increases. So continuing on, so those are some things around main meals. Again, we're seeing everything from ingredients to really quick, easy meals mix to And probably many of you have seen this on Instagram, is folks have been doing some amazing baking and beautiful cakes. We are seeing that families seem to be bonding in the kitchen together, not only in meals, but very much in baking. Across channels, across any categories related to baking, we're seeing very strong growth, both through the ingredient segment, which seems to bring the emotional benefit of creativity, as well as mixes that deliver the functional benefit of convenience. So we're really interested to watch how this continues, as in some ways it seems like ingredient-based from scratch baking was a bit of a lost art. So as we look to the holidays, it will be interesting to see how that is reformed from some of these trends during our stay-at-home period. And so that's just one way that consumers have reinvested their time. Let's look at the next slide. Another trend that is very much peaking is the stay-at-home spa and salon. And by the way, this isn't just for women. We're very much seeing it in men too, as whether it's because, again, the spa or the salon is closed, or whether it's just trying something new, both men and women's grooming products, hair color, just a whole variety of products is really increasing. And a number of these are definitely still continuing to stay solid, as someone may not have thought about a hair color, in this first week or two of stock up, but all of a sudden reality is setting in, and needs a refill or a fill-in solution of sorts. So it's interesting to watch this. And we also, in the last just couple of weeks, as recently as the new 412 data we're seeing today, we're definitely seeing aromatherapy oils and accessories continuing to index high. Now, in some ways, some of the oils, have some unique abilities, I think, that can help with on the cleaning front and disinfecting front, but a variety of other reasons as well. So it's interesting to watch these trends that might not have been quite as top of mind, in the initial stock up. And I think particularly these will be interesting to watch on the other side of this stay-at-home time, because it will likely be that not all habits will return to normal. Again, as people are either indulging themselves or just needing necessity fill-ins, they've learned there are things they can do at home in a sanctuary of sorts that maybe they don't necessarily need to fully return to the spa or salon, and particularly with the economic pressures that we'll be under. So interesting to watch that as well. And finally, another key emerging trend that I shouldn't say it's emerging, actually, it's really been here, but it has not necessarily been ignored or abandoned during the stock up. And we certainly think there is significant opportunity for accelerated growth going forward, is that many attributes customers are looking for are pointing out strong support for the planet, support for our local communities. And we believe this is a trend that will very much continue. Certainly, as you can see in this chart, it's a bit of an eye chart, but we will certainly make sure you have copies of these slides in the recording afterwards. There have been some very strong performance continually across grain-free. The little dot is actually the more than 100% increases we've seen over time in grain-free. But I think particularly as you look at areas like plant-based and welfare, animal welfare, and think of the impacts again within our communities, within our world, and thinking about population increase, these are trends that were already growing, but are even more well-staged in the future, and particularly as things return a bit to normal. So natural trends to point, directions of this, the natural trends are the ones in green. We had a question about NPI. That is a vernacular we tend to use often. NPI stands for the natural products industry, and that is products that are generally classified as natural and positioned towards a natural customer. So great question on that front. So again, this is an area that we do expect to see continue, and we're very excited to see as consumers do take care of themselves typically first before they take care of their world or their community. But certainly much research I think we've all seen is that there is a heightened awareness now, whether it's for our food supply in terms of ensuring there's food near us, or whether it's related to what we can do to protect ourselves and our families and our communities. We believe this is something that will grow as we continue forward. So, and we have another question, sir, on MULO, that represents multi-outlet. If you think about the multi-outlet view, that is a group of mainstream supermarkets and mass merchants and drugstores. So it's a great view across the larger universe of stores in terms of kind of what mainstream products are. That's the total, like in other words, the total sort of think of it as grocery and overall view. So with that, I will turn it back over to Katie. We have lots more we would have liked to have covered, but in the shortness of time, we think most important, many of you would like to know a lot more details about what you can be doing now to think about strategically how you move forward. So with that, Katie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. And before I drive us home with these brand strategies, I will say I can totally resonate with the stay-at-home spa and salon. Catherine and I were kind of debating on whether or not we should show our faces during this, and our roots told us that we shouldn't. So,
amen, sister.
So what is happening in supply chain and retail? Before I get into the brand strategies, I just want to talk a little bit about the history in the past, 4 to 6 weeks and what we're experiencing from a supply chain perspective and what retailers are experiencing. So the national stock up in those weeks that we talked about from consumers was on an unexpected and unprecedented scale. Demand from retailer in any given DC was 2 to 5 times the normal demand, and it happened really quick. And there was really nothing at that point that any distributor, wholesaler, retailer could have planned for at that point in time. That demand led to capacity constraints, whether that be receiving in warehouses, stocking product, picking and getting product out the door. And that demand also led to supplier shortages, whether that be from imports, ingredient shortages, or really SKU optimization and prioritization from the supplier side. So what that led to was some quick contingency planning. We've hired labor from food service distributors and wholesalers that were negatively impacted by the pandemic to keep them working. We were forced to transition assets, people, trucks, and products from DC to DC to mitigate some of that risk. And we've implemented order capping so we can ensure retailers get their fair share of allocation during these unprecedented times. Buying levels are remaining elevated, and they're expected to be for some unknown period of time. So supply chain is making significant progress, but we're still catching up. Many suppliers are implementing what they're calling their limited set of core SKUs and doing some sort of SKU optimization during this time frame. And retailers want to continue to seek innovation and want to continue to do their category reviews, but they have to put their focus on safety of their employees and safety of their consumers. So filling shelves is really first priority after that safety of the workforce out there. So how should brands approach current times? No one knows for certain the best approach in reacting to this current situation. However, the way we're thinking about it for our brands is twofold. Number one, you don't have current distribution. So that could be a brand new brand to the marketplace, or it could be a line extension that had been planned. And then number two, current distribution, meaning you're on the shelves today. So if you're not in distribution, you were planning innovation, like I said, whether it be a totally new brand or a line extension, our recommendation is to really hunker down. Use this time to work through your strategic go-to-market plan, use this time to prepare for your future. And with that said, KeHE hasn't slowed down on seeking innovation on our side. So communicate with the category management team to ensure you're ready and we're ready for when retailers are ready and when this virus has subsided. There is hope. I think at the end, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Our retailer partners have reached out to us asking for insurance that we weren't slowing down on foraging for innovation. And we want to have a robust pipeline for them to fill once it is important and once this is all over. And consumer mindsets, they'll be cautious after this, we have a feeling, but they're more likely to be adaptive and agile post-pandemic. So therefore, innovative and agile and adaptive brands that can meet them there, we feel will be big winners in the end. If you are in current distribution, our recommendation is really just to stick this out. I read a study that quoted 30% of consumers stated they were forced to buy an alternative brand versus their standard brand due to out of stock. And depending on the category, 30 to 80% of those consumers that switch to an alternative brand said that they will likely stick with that brand. They'll remain there. So therefore, there's this brand swapping going on. And yeah, natural brands tend to be the slower movers on shelf, but they are getting unexpected consumer trial during, the nature of the business right now. Promotions are still important. Although some retailers have temporarily paused promotions, many retailers are still promoting. And many retailers need those dollars to help offset some of the increase in unforeseen in-store expenses. And then communication is key. Be sure to communicate any shortages, any issues with your distributors, wholesalers, or retailers, and be agile with your production capabilities, but also be careful and keep employees safe. And then how should brands kind of approach the new normal? At the beginning, I said we don't know what the new normal is, but we do know that it's going to be different from what we're used to. So some key indicators to think about. Consumers have reduced incomes. The last study I read was 22 million Americans have filed for unemployment in the past 4 weeks, and 5.3 million of those were in the past week alone. That's nearly 14% of our labor force, and it's not estimated to stop anytime soon, so it'll continue to rise. And again, I'm not an expert, but consumers probably aren't going to bounce back from this as quickly as it relates to their finances. Prior to COVID, about 50% of our eating occasions were at home. And now, as you can imagine, it's nearly 100%. This could influence consumer behavior long-term. Could eating at home be the new normal? Will consumers be hesitant to go back to restaurants and bars quickly? I don't know the answers to those, but those are some of the things that we're thinking about. Pantry stocking. We know that the weeks ending 3/15 and 3/22 were massive stock up weeks, but could pantry stocking become the new normal? Will consumers be nervous that this may happen again and they need to have the products that they need in order to survive? And then many of our holidays, birthday parties, weddings have been canceled or postponed due to COVID. So when this is all over, how do you think family traditions and social gatherings will be? Will that be even more important? Will the 2020 holiday season be the most important yet as families can gather again? So what are some of the key actions that brands can take based on those indicators? We're going to have to meet people where they are financially. Promotions and value are going to be really important to consumers that want to experience those gatherings and traditions, but might not be in a position to do so financially. Shelf life and production. With a potential increase in pantry stocking and a forecasted elevated demand for some time, are brands needing to pivot their plans if necessary? And then consumers are connecting in these times with recipes, at-home eating. Is that the new normal? Will ready-to-eat products be less of a demand while ingredient-based products be higher? And lastly, key thematic opportunities wrapped around seasonality, wrapped around holidays, events. That might speak to the consumer more than ever since they've been slightly deprived of that connection for quite some time. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on was regarding the new potential normal of a virtual world. Whether it be working from home or selling from home, this might have a long-term impact on how brands go to market. So one real example is the fact that we cannot host our annual holiday show, and shows are near and dear to my heart, some of my favorite weeks of the year. It's typically held at Chicago McCormick Center, and we're going to be transitioning that to a virtual show called Holidays of Hope. So what are some of the things that we typically encourage brands to do at a physical show? Have that eye-catching booth, make sure you're demoing and sampling like crazy, and really engage the crowd. Get in front of your booth, draw the retailers in. Those are all things that in a virtual environment might not make sense anymore. So we're gonna have to pivot. What's gonna be important in a virtual setting? Deeper discounts, something that's gonna catch the retailer's eye virtually. Data and insights around products, around categories, around how your brand is gonna help the category as a whole versus the taste or texture potentially. And then product images, making sure you have rock star images that will catch the eye virtually since you can't hold, touch, and feel the product. And then lastly thing I wanted to say is Zoom, typically show your face, not today. Make it more personable, pick up the phone, connect. I know you guys want to hear from us and we want to hear from you. So let's over communicate. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Katie. And I know we're hitting right against our 30 minutes now. So for those of you that can't stick around the next moment or two, we'll certainly make sure this recording is out to everyone that's registered. So that will be coming. As far as just very brief takeaways, as you hopefully gained some knowledge and ideas for moving forward here over the next weeks, months, a few takeaways. One, again, natural products are continuing to grow even through this stock up. And we are seeing it. We know grocery shopping will never be the same as we've historically experienced it, and new consumer patterns are going to keep changing both how we shop, how we cook, and probably how we eat. So it's critical that we stay really close to that. And in that, as you heard from Katie, as well as I referenced earlier, be really vigilant and thoughtful as you design your strategies for the future, both in this immediate term and in the longer term, and really anticipate and embrace these changes for growth. That fits, I think, well, two questions I thought I would quickly try to touch on, and Katie, let me, if you'd like to add anything. One was in reference to whether we think this will continue through the recession, with the likely recession, or at least economic continued crisis with high unemployment through this. And time will tell. Again, we don't have a crystal ball. Early indicators, or at least if you use components of the 2009-ish recession, would be that natural and organic products should continue to grow, and many of these other trends will continue along as well. There's a lot of components related to that, but during that time period, we certainly did see growth, although there was some bifurcation between those that could buy very value-added products, which is why a lot of the things Katie mentioned are important to think about: your strategy, your positioning, et cetera. As well as, certainly value-oriented, whether it's larger sizes, private label flourished back in those days. But we do expect these trends to transcend and continue forward still as well. So I think that's important, to think about, and certainly a really great question there. Katie, anything to add to that?
No, I agree, Catherine, with everything you said. I think these product trends, are going to continue. And I think that as consumers are almost forced into trial, there's a big opportunity for our natural products industry.
Yeah, definitely agree. And then probably the one last to hit quickly, asking about new customers into these natural items. Katie mentioned 15 million additional shoppers versus the same week the prior year buying natural products. We don't know yet how many were new versus how many, were just stocking up on that particular week, but certainly we, from what we can anticipate and generally qualitatively have heard, there have been many new customers. And so certainly this can be a huge opportunity, I think, for our industry, for many of you as brands, to take advantage of that and be very thoughtful, again, using some of the tips that Katie shared around how you can come back and get customers, even if they had not tried it before, to once they've had it, to buy it again. So I think a massive opportunity. Again, Katie, anything to add to that?
You got it, Catherine, you're good.
Super. Well, with that, we have certainly run a bit past our time. You can see here on this slide, if you don't have a SPINS account manager or KeHE category manager you're already working with, some contact information. And certainly most importantly, I really, again, want to echo Katie's words in saying thank you to all the frontline folks, particularly KeHE. Rick mentioned in the chat, all the KeHE frontline employees that are really working to get product back in the stores, and certainly to the many broker partners and brands, and without a doubt, our retailers on the front line. So it's a difficult time and a challenging time, but certainly we have a lot of heroes out there, and to all our own employees. So everyone have a safe and happy weekend, and thank you again for attending.
Thank you guys. Thinking of everyone.